Hey, welcome everyone. My name is Tristan Claridge and I'm the convener of the webinar series for the International Social Capital Association. In this session, we welcome Dr. Marais for a presentation and discussion about the role of social capital in ICT for development. Dr. Marais is a principal researcher in the e-government impact area of the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research based in Pretoria, South Africa. He has more than 15 years of experience in development research in organizational, entrepreneurial, and community levels. Monitoring and evaluation work has been done from social capital, knowledge creation, systems thinking, sustainability, and behavioral change perspectives. Regional mapping approaches have been used on platforms such as Kumu.io, and he holds a PhD in informatics awarded by the University of Pretoria in 2017 for his work on social capital in the village operator model for rural broadband internet access and use. So welcome, Mario, and over to you.
Thank you, welcome. I'd first like to declare my allegiance to rural development. So this is my crew t-shirt. So this means that Tech4D was a rural development program that ran for about 6 years in South Africa, sponsored by the Department of Science and Technology. And it was one of the biggest programs to really look at introducing technology into schools. And so that means that, okay, I'm a crew member, right? So I'm not an armchair academic. I know there's no toilets at some schools. And that your best conversations are held while you're sitting on 3 bricks in a warehouse that is being built. So that's one of the pleasures of it. But okay, let me go over to the overview. I'm just going to go forward. So we're going to talk about a project that talks about broadband for all. The focus is education, which is my first love. South Africa also scores very badly in any education metric that you can care to work out. We've got some world-class universities, but if you look at the secondary school system, it's pretty poor in most areas of the country. And that leaves us with the question about what are we doing about it? So one of the starting points is to give schools internet access, right? I mean, most schools have internet access, and especially in times of COVID, it has become more important. So let's look at an approach that was developed in 2008, 2006, 7, 8, 2008, and we started work in 2009. And I'll go through sort of a bit of context and then some research questions, and then I will tell a story about the people of interest. So the perennial problem of ICT for development projects is how do they become sustainable? I started becoming interested in that in 2010. So sorry, this project is a bit later. I'll get my timeline right. And so I started writing about sustainability, and I talked to ecologists to get a picture of what do they mean by sustainability. So I wasn't into economic models, but I was into complex ecological systems to figure out what happens. And because you've got such a panarchy of systems, it kind of sounds to me more like the real world. So I started with this biological model. And so if I'm a systems thinker, so reasons for failure, I see inside the scope of this thing called a project, which you inject into an environment. It's like logging a forest, right? It's a big intervention. And within the community itself and outside the community in the larger socioeconomic system of South Africa, with about in the rural areas, you get poverty, you get joblessness among between 40 and 60% of the youth. So we're not talking about a minor problem, we're talking about a major problem. You come out of school and you don't have a job. And there isn't economy in the rural areas either to really stimulate a job. So what are we missing in terms of the whole development thing? We bring in lots of resources for the project and then we leave. So that's what we're missing. The sustainability of so-called parachute projects, we jump in, But even government interventions has the same kind of problem. Government has got a 3-year time window. It's called the medium-term funding framework, the MPF. And so their strategies might be long-term, but their projects are normally 3 years, which is not enough. Okay, so I'm just going to move on to the next slide. So if we look at today's, this is hot data off the press from one of my friends this afternoon. So if you look at the Department of Basic Education's list from June 2021, there's 2,508, 25,000 schools, ordinary schools. Schools without LTE coverage is 1,456. So there's been a significant change since when I did my research. So LTE coverage has really come on board. Your problem is still, where is the coverage? And where are the schools? And also, what does LTE coverage cost you? So the cost issue. So if you look at rural schools, of these 25,000 schools, 15,000 schools are rural. So you're sitting with the predominant, so 15,000 over 25, I mean, that is 60%, if my math is right. If not, correct me, 3/4, sorry. 3/5, yeah, 3/5. So commercial viability of broadband connectivity in rural South Africa is dependent on, do you have enough density of people that can pay? Enough people per square kilometer of your coverage to make your towers pay? And once you put these LTE networks in, the problem starts. That was reframed by one of our projects right from the word go. If you talk to telecoms people, they talk about the last mile problem. From their perspective, the actual, it starts with your backbone, and then you have all these tributaries, and then you've got the last mile to get to somebody's home. This project was termed first inch, first mile. The first inch is the inch between your fingers and the keyboard. Do you know how to use a computer? So a user-centric approach to telecoms for development. Then the other question is, after you've done the first inch, what about the first mile? Are you connected where you are to the internet? And that's the first mile problem. So what I'm talking about tonight is the first mile problem and the first inch problem of getting people to adopt technology. Okay, so what you may find as I'm talking, all of the time we're trying to put the normal view of the world upside down. You know, as we go from, we really user-centric and we say, look, the people's at the top and industry supports the livelihoods of people. So this is the 2011 census, and it shows a unique distribution in South Africa of where people are and where fiber networks are. So if you look at the fiber routes, this is the spider webs, and if you look at the population density, and this map tells you what is your distance from a fiber. So the fiber is the backbone, so how far are you away from a fiber? Now, obviously, if you're in Cape Town, you're in luck. You're in the 0 to 1 kilometer range from a fiber for the whole of Cape Town, the metros, okay? Then if you go along the coast, you can see that certain coastal towns like Plettenberg Bay and holiday spots are blessed with some coverage. This is one of the big metros called Buffalo Bay, Port Elizabeth. We've got the car industry focus. And then we go to my hometown, East London, where Mercedes makes cars, a smaller town. And then when you go up to this region, for example, and this was called the Old Transkei, this is a huge, what we used to call the country of the isiXhosa. So it was a homeland. And you had in the apartheid era, you had a whole system of regional governance here, okay? So look at the rural density in terms of it's dense, but also the people are between 20 and 25 kilometers away from fiber. So you can see there's a real, you don't have a last mile problem, you've got a 25 kilometer problem. This is around Grahamstown, which is the University of Rhodes is there. And then we've got Durban, a major port. And this is a holiday coast. So you can see the coverage. again, where the previous president of South Africa lives, around the Nkandla area, in deep rural Zululand, and you're far away from fiber. And you get to Gauteng, where about 30% or 35% of the economy of South Africa is. You can see the density. Same here in Bloemfontein, which is a regional capital, and they put the Constitutional Court there. So there's lots of action there. And then you get clusters around mines. So these areas where you see this fiber, you have mines. And so this is also a coal mining area. Here we've got the Kruger National Park. You've got the border to Mozambique. And this is quite highly populated. And this is an area of population. We've got the capital of Limpopo, and so on. But you can see that we've got a very big area where you're a long, long way from fiber, and there are clusters that do not have fiber. It's, as we say, it's a 20-kilometer problem. Now, if we overlay that with the schools, that's why I showed the first distribution. You can see this is where the schools are. So if you look at the composite diagram, you'll see this is just a picture of all the schools. So this is your 25,000 schools, and the ones that are outside LTE coverage, I'll make it a little bit easier by just going on one slide, is shown in red. So again, you see this is I come from the Eastern Cape, and there's a tremendously high density of people living in rural areas in these areas. So the spatial development planners call it dense rural. And South Africa's got dense rural for this whole area here and for the whole of KZN. And then you've got dense rural here in areas of, this is a booming farming industry. And you've also got some density around mines. So people group around mines. If you look, Gauteng is obviously not rural, and so there's few schools that are outside LTE coverage, but still, so you can see there are huge areas where you've got quite a concentration of people. The density of the schools indicated, but you don't have LTE coverage, and that's as of June last year. So if you go to this one, ordinary schools, then you can see these are schools with LTE. And let me just see, so interspersed, let's just get back to it. So interspersed, you do have coverage. So the coverage is improving, but you've got these islands. Come on, let me just keep my hands away from the keyboard, sorry. Okay, so that gets us back to the composite picture. And you can see this is the flow of the Orange River. So there's farming, you get table grapes from here quite early from South Africa, and we compete with Chile to get the best table grapes to the UK, for example. So this is where your table grapes come from. And that's why you've got this funny picture of schools with LTE. Okay. So in the rural schools, if the education system doesn't have money for enough teachers or for enough material or for paying for Wi-Fi in schools or internet access, they pay for internet access to get an admin computer online to provide them information. So if you talk about school labs or kids having Wi-Fi in the school to use their tablets, then that doesn't happen if the parents don't have money, or unless you're in a rich province like Gauteng or the Western Cape for that matter. And so there's a lack of money and people for sustained support and maintenance of ICT infrastructure at schools. So the perennial problem is you get projects that put equipment in and then they leave and the equipment breaks down. So who maintains it? Who does a budget for the operational costs of ICT? And then due to crime, the computer labs are locked up after school. So school is not an open space. You can't go back there and spend your time and use a computer lab. The computer labs are locked up. So you've got 20 computers, but they're only usable during school times. And so, you don't have time to use them on your own time. So that's a big hurdle. And even to this day, our robotics and coding and robotics curriculum advocates a school lab with Intel i5 computers in it. And I tear my hair out. As you can see, there isn't a lot left. But anyway, to address this problem, Broadband for All, so BB stands for Broadband for All, looked at wireless mesh technology development. So if you've got a fiber point and you get to a high site, then from there you distribute to a community using a wireless mesh. And I'll show that later pictorially. And so we developed this so that you have redundancy in your wireless network. So if one link goes down, you've got two links that can compensate. So this means schools are linked to each other, and the schools are collectively linked to your broadband backbone. So we're doing a focus for, it's a technology focus, okay, which means the problem science technology wants to industrialize the technology. We did sell it to a telecoms provider, manufacturer, but looking at the backbone implementation of the mesh is network operations. And then we said, let's have village operators. And I'll explain the term later. And then I was doing village operator modeling, business modeling, because there was a business model behind this that we didn't know at all. So the business model was the project fund was actually divided up into, let's say there's 14 clusters or 14 entrepreneurs. We actually divided the money that the project got into those amounts, and those amounts would cover all the infrastructure plus in starting the business. You've got legal and regulatory issues, and so there's a whole bunch of issues because we were doing a project that was kind of unique. It was kind of trying to start a new business model as well at the same time. So we were trying to do too much at once, which is the backbone or the bottom line. If you look at where we are now, I am located here in the city of Tshwane, also called Pretoria or Pitoli. So I'm round about here at the moment. This is going to the east towards Mozambique. This is the main route to Mozambique. And here we've got the district municipality of Nkangala, which is a part of the Mpumalanga province. And this is the border to Limpopo. So this Sekhukhune district municipality is in Limpopo. This area here is a rich orange producing area. And so you've got lots of farming around this area. So we were working in this part. And if you look at this road, this is the main artery to the north, the N1 to the north that runs to Messina and to Zimbabwe ultimately. So from here, from my working in a CSR, I was about 150 kilometers away from the furthest clusters of schools that we were serving in this area. So this is about 150 kilometers. Okay. Just context. So if you then look at the spread of this clusters of schools, so each of these blobs represent a cluster of schools that are connected by one wireless mesh network. And then the backbone runs on these high sites that you can see here. So one of them are Nostrikop. In fact, you can see right to the next highest mountains way far. And I've been on top of Nostrikop, and one of our colleagues climbed up that tower, and it kind of sways in the wind. So we've got a rigger that does that. And interesting is that you've got clusters of people and the interesting thing about the dynamics here, this is the heart of Kwandebele, the Ndebele people. So they were one of the smallest groups. So this is one of the smallest homelands. But all of this infrastructure, the reason why people are living here and not in Pretoria is because of the homeland policy. So most of the people around this road, actually, I had a gardener that lived in Kwaggafontein. So he was traveling to be my gardener in Pretoria. He was traveling 100 kilometers each day. 200 kilometers, 100 kilometers by bus and then by taxi to get. So he was getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning. So what we have here is that most of the source of the money that comes in here is not from farming or any of the mines here, but it comes from Pretoria and surroundings. And this area is quite famous because if you've heard of the Mutsi choir, which they got fame in the the show on American TV, Who's Got Talent? And so the Mutsi choirs won quite a few. They got to the finals, I think, of America's Who's Got Talent. And the Mutsi choir was created by a doctor by the name of Hugo Tempelman. Hugo Tempelman did his tropical training in South Africa in the Durban area. And then he said, I want to stay in South Africa. I don't want to go back to the Netherlands because I can't do anything there, or somebody will sue me or moan about my smoke of my barbecue or something. Aldo knows all about that, you know. And so Hugo said, let me pick the area where there's the least amount of hospital coverage. So he put his clinic down in Mutsi. And this was the time of HIV. And he developed a laboratory there as well. He's got a major award from the Dutch king. So he's a commander of the empire or some title like that. And Hugo put up a lab as well. And the mother-to-child transmission in his Mutsi site was the lowest in South Africa. So Hugo's doing something right, and he's still there and he's still going. So Hugo's providing medical services for 160,000 people just in this area. Just to give you an idea of the density. Okay. Right, so this scale, this is 23 kilometers. So if you look at the size of the clusters, it's about 10 kilometers. This is along the road, that's why it's elongated. And the areas are designed around line of sight of the schools. So each of these schools are within line of sight of each other. And that's how the areas were defined, and also according to the capacity of the backbone. Okay. So this is as rural as it gets. So if you look at the backbone, which is a radio backbone, then this is, we've got a telecom tower at CSR, it's actually in our campus, and that has a radio link to Soshanguve. And Soshanguve, this is 5 gigahertz. It's like shining a light, it's straight line of sight. You can see Renosterkop, and Renosterkop is a major distribution center to 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you've got the SAPS tower on Mutsi Mountain, Berg in Dutch as Afrikaans, and that distributes it to Siabuswa, and there's a local link to different areas of Siabuswa. Siabuswa is the capital of the old KwaNdebele, so it's a regional service town where all the local government is seated, and linked to Volbok, that's next to a nice big dam. And you can see the links up here. You have to go from here with a straight link up to Syferfontein that distributes to these areas to the north, Siabe and Maripiane. And commercial farming starts here. This area's got no large-scale commercial farming. It's all outside the traditional tribal areas. Okay, so you've got, there's no fiber. Your last, what's the scale? I think the longest we can go is 20 kilometers. So your last 20 kilometers is via 5 gigahertz radios that can do about 100 megabits per second maximum. Okay. So one of the ideas was, and this is a bit out of sequence, but I want to focus on the village operators, just the concept, and I'll get back to it. But we decided, so we're just going to look after these areas and look after the technical support to the schools and keep the schools on the internet. So we also principals of the schools to recommend young people that was at their school. So these people are still around and they were at that school, and so they were then interviewed for entrepreneurial attitude and experience, their technical ability. Some of them actually had a internet cafe, and then we gave them training in basic network support. In other words, what do you plug into what? And if you see the kettle plugged in and the lights aren't on, because that happens a lot, then you actually just need to tell people not to plug the kettle into this specially colored plug, which is red. The whole thing is red and there's a big sign up. So in terms of technical terms, there was a service desk that a school could call. So that's your tier 1 support. And they were the local tier 2 support. They were getting assignments from the service desk in terms of telling you to go to that school and fix something, the internet's not working. And they would also then look at the equipment, in other words, remove viruses from computers. If you've got a school, you have to send your your PC to Groblersdal, and it takes 3 months for a virus to get repaired, to get removed from the computer and gets back. It's back for a week and then it's infected by a USB disk again. So how many of the computers at rural schools are actually available if they're running Windows? Because people copy software. They don't have money to buy software, so they copy software. And see, from our colleagues' experience in terms of rural businesses, we gave them a video camera. And a video camera is because people like to document lives. So weddings, funerals, 21st birthday parties. So this is to get money by video editing a DVD and then printing a nice cover on it and then sending it as to all the attendants. One of the village operators was also a deputy pastor at a church. And in that sense, his business model was good because the pastor said, well, this is our deputy pastor. Each service of the church will be filmed by him. And if you want to see our services, you buy a DVD from our deputy pastor. So that was a good business model based on his membership of the church. A laptop, a printer, and a laminator, because people want to print documents out, like CVs, or that goes by faxes to government offices still. And a laminator to make signs that you can actually put up and it will survive. And this was from experience of previous minimal equipment. Now, the VIA model as such, that was the heart of this, the human idea, was the technical support is, we want the ISP to be supported by trusted community members with in-depth knowledge of the culture and the context and personal relationship with customers. It's from a business point of view, it's saying this trust and knowledge, we want that to transfer to form the basis of a proactive and hence effective service. In other words, you find out the patterns that people, you know what people will do, and so you give them advice so they don't do the problems that they will particularly, the patterns that will particularly happen, like the kettle issue, or the fact that they've got viruses on their computers, or the fact that the local area network in the school needs to be reconfigured because the coverage isn't good. So you can provide a customized service because you know your schools well. So you're talking about knowing 10 schools well. And one of the reasons you know the schools well is because you were in one of them. So you know the kind of issues that kids and teachers have in terms of getting to internet access. The other side of it is how do you become self-sustainable? So VIAs as local entrepreneurs that offer a wide range of services to clients. So they each had an office. So you've got an office into which clients can come, and that's where your printer is, your laminator. And most of them bought photocopy machines as well. And they bought an extra second-hand desktop so people can then get access to the internet via their high-speed link to the backbone. So it goes slightly better into the backbone. And this will lower the barrier to access because the charges that they ask people is a lot less than your internet cafe. In one of these towns, for example, there's an internet cafe with 40 seats. But you're going to get charged about, I'm going to translate this into dollars, $1 for 15 minutes of internet access. And so the idea was that you would get somebody from the area that knows the people and are trusted, and at the same time they develop a business. So, right. Okay. So if you look at sustainable development as a whole, so this is an attempt at a systems approach, a focus on entrepreneurs and small businesses. This is a huge part of the government strategies to say small businesses create the most jobs per money invested. You can invest a lot of capital into the Gautrain, our rapid transit system, and you create 300 jobs. So you can look at 10 million rands investment, or 1 million, let's say 50 million rands. You can look at $1 million investment, and it might be that there are 5 jobs that are created as a result of that. And our government still has an infrastructure strategy because we don't have enough IT infrastructure, we don't have enough electricity infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a huge focus on small businesses. And then the question becomes, what about the role of social capital? Because what sustains small businesses? So I've got this definition. This is my favorite definition of sustainable development. I know there's 15 million of them, but this is my favorite one. It comes from one of our, from UCT, and it comes from a research done and the reflection on the South American development theorists, Max Neef and Escobar, where sustainable development is achieved through self-reliant human scale development, which flows from an individual level to the local, the regional and national levels, which is horizontally interdependent and vertically complementary. Now, the horizontal interdependence is quite clear. In development, the problem is to develop this vertical complementary, because complementary means that the top-down development has to be aligned. So bottom-up driven development of networks of relationships around aligned interests between the different levels is required to achieve the necessary interdependence and complementarity. So where's the interdependence between the national level and the local level? And how do you get this alignment between, how do you get real bottom-up driven development of networks that scale enough, so that a big enough voice, so that they become an interest group that can really negotiate with government? So that to me is the key problem of really this organizational level. And that's one of our battles, because our NGOs were decimated after apartheid was overcome and the ANC became the ruling party, and Nelson Mandela became the president. And within 3 years, our NGOs that were thriving on apartheid-related sources of funds, a lot of them died. And so we do have a lack of organization of small activists and small NGOs. One might call it the missing layer. And if you talk about entrepreneurs for sustained development, Max Neef, and I agree with him, call them the invisible sectors or the micro-organizations. These small entrepreneurs, they may be living from hand to mouth because they're hawking tomatoes right next to the side of the road, or they're selling sweets, or they're selling Doritos, but they've got small bits of food that they're selling to people at transit points because they're going home and they haven't eaten yet, or in the mornings. So how do you get bottom-up development and linkages? What does development through entrepreneurship means? And so Kentaro Teyama, to whom I've talked to a few times, and luckily so about 3 times, about 3 weeks ago, another conversation with Kentaro, this thing about socially driven, business driven, and balance driven entrepreneurs, a balance between making money and making a difference in the community, to balance these 2 factors. So social capital, this is one of the many definitions. I like this one because it's a network of associations and relations that bind people together as a community. And you pick up the norms and the psychological capacity, trust, which are essential. And it's productive of future collective action of goods. And what I mean by future collective action of goods is this interdependence that you get locally to organize yourself better, to make better use of local resources, plus this vertical striving to get alignment, to get government to listen to you as to what you really need. Okay, so one example would be, in practice, I asked people at the school, at the schools we were doing tablets, when I got this red t-shirt, I asked them as the evaluator of that team, what is your first priority? If we were to give you a choice, here's the tablets, 15 tablets, and use them in schools, or you can take the money. What would you do with the money? The reaction was, we would repair our toilets and we'd buy toilet paper. So that's the first priority of a rural school. Not internet connectivity, not tablets. It's having water, having electricity, and having toilets and sanitation that work. So inherently, social capital is a multi-dimensional, multi-level concept. So we are talking about the networks, or the components, the levels of domain of analysis, and the character of the function, bonding, bridging, and linking. So bonding, this you guys know social capital. So, but bonding is the stuff between family, very tight family bonds. Bridging links friends, and linking is linking to another level, link to power, and also linking to another group. Bridging is links to people fairly close to you. You might have a friendship circle that's part of your bridging links, and it also bridges you to other friendship circles. And churches play a lot of this role in our society. And you have systemic relationships between the dimensions that are normally not really considered. And interactions involve substitutions of social capital at one level for that at another level. So there's kind of a rolling substitution of social capital which gets converted, which gets into another form, it gets transformed. And how's the whole more than the sum of the parts? That's a question. This is just, I've never seen this diagram somewhere else, but it's in Halpern's book. And so it just shows you that, well, we've got sanctions, norms, and networks that kind of define the context in a non-structural manner. And then we've got the more structural things. It says this is the kind of links that we have, the networks as linking, bridging, and bonding. And the micro level, what you could do is you're linking to the powerful, and then the norm is generosity. If you don't reciprocate, I buy you a drink, you buy me one back. And the sanctions is shaming, and you're not part of the community anymore. Bridging your friends, bonding your parents, the strong bonds, your meso level, the neighborhood. Obviously, there's things like group conflict, out-group understanding, mutual respect as a norm, you would hope. And then get a macro level where you can put government, the world, or you could say this is the local provincial department of education. Whatever you define as a macro level that is relevant to this. So most of the time, the money, 95% of the money that comes from the government goes into the provinces. So the provinces don't have their own money, but they get money to actually run the provinces. So your source of money is either national or your provincial province. Your municipality's funding depends on whether you have people that live there that can pay taxes, rates and taxes. So municipalities don't have a large base of resources if you're in a poor rural area. They get grants straight from Treasury and so on. Okay, I don't want to linger too long on that. So in ICT4D, there's been a huge focus on telecenters and mobile communications. So at one point, telecenters were quite popular. And you've got this interaction between ICT adoption and social dynamics. And this is at individual and societal levels. And so if you expand your social network, you get to quality information sources and you grow assets. And the trust and confidence is now built by local social networks that is supported by IT. So your Facebook group and your WhatsApp group and all that creates new groupings. And so ICT used for expansion of social networks beyond the local areas. So you can be trusted by non-locals, like Aldo in Netherlands. I mean, we met a few times at a conference, but ever since then, we've been part of the same social network. It's called the Community Informatics Community, which is really a small research group. So I think it's one large family. I'm lucky enough to belong to the Community Informatics Research Network and the Community Informatics field. Aldo, you can maybe say something about that later because you've been longer there than I have. And then telecenters, the whole research done on telecenters, this thing about entrepreneurs. And then around about 2006, it started emerging that people are talking about intermediaries or social connectors. And there's lots of names for them. Kathy Urquhart also did work in Bolivia. I think it was in Bolivia or Colombia. But her example is quite relevant because it's a group of farmers and you bring this kiosk into the village. We see it a lot in India as well. And the young farmers go to this kiosk and they see all this information and they're on it, they're IT literate and they go for it. Then they go back and tell the older farmers about it. The oldest farmers talks about it, says, no, they don't want to go. So they talk about what their problems are. And then the younger farmer goes to the kiosk, the telecenter, gets information, and then translates it into terms that they can understand, goes back to the meeting or the get together, and translates it for them so they can actually apply it. So you can either use the word intermediary, but there are social connectors and there are translators from whatever the people who put the information on they thought was the right audience, vis-a-vis the real audience. There's always a gap between the envisaged audience and the real audience, okay? And entrepreneurs is a concept by Renzi for Rensburg that says you can make money by getting government to actually know what they want to know in terms to execute their small business development strategies. So you would go in and train people how to do audits of how many small businesses are in an area and sell that to the local municipality so they can build a database to actually know how many of these businesses there are and how do they allocate top-down funds to work on small business development. Okay, so my research for my PhD was a single case study, so the real-life context of the VOs. So I'm not going deep into the, just that it's influenced by qualitative research. So we're talking here about 4-hour face-to-face conversations, in-depth interviews that was trying to elicit the individual experiences and views of the VOs, their view, not my view. So as interpretivist, I engaged in their social setting. I went to them and so I took their perspective. So mapping the networks of relationships of the VO themselves. So putting the VOs in the center of a map of relationships and to understand the value that's unlocked via these relationships, to better understand the importance of building social capital, how it's built and used in practice. So from 2012 to 2015, yes, I was out of it. It's been a long day. That was the study. So it's over 3 years that I visited them and had different kinds of engagement, conducted a workshop as well on entrepreneurship that was heavily focused on social capital. So we've got primary data from interviews, observation during interviews and project activities. I used the influence mapping technique, and the secondary data was all the project documents and information about use and usage and so on. Okay, so influence mapping is a technique that developed from work done in the Delta, the Niger Delta. So I have a picture of it somewhere, but the basic thing is that you make the relationship tangible. I'll show you how I made them tangible. And you explore all the relationships. In this case, it's in the Niger Delta, Claudia Schiffer. She actually investigated how does water management happen here? Who's the powerful and what do they do? And you have to do something that is visual and is co-constructed and of value to interviewee, because you're trying to engage the NGO to really keep their participation levels high. And it's a combination of social network analysis and power mapping that's used in a participatory manner. And this is really participatory because we draw these network map of actors involved together, and we characterize different kinds of links and indicate the influence of actors. So let me go on and let's see, hopefully that pops up. So in an interview, I would first explain what is this all about. So the question is, who are the people, organizations that influence you? How do they influence you? Determine the degree of the influence. We have a qualitative discussion about these influences. So what is this influence like? And then add the orientation of the people that you interact with. Do they have a technical orientation? They come to you because they're crazy about IT, or what's called in the rural areas technology. That's a G, it's magic, it's technology. So technology has a sort of magic associated with it. It's a metaphor for magic, which is quite interesting. Do they want to help you as an entrepreneur or help you develop in some way? And then to have a look back and say, well, if I look at my network of my spider's web of relationship, which relationships do I need to establish new ones or strengthen in the future? And which should I cut because they're parasites on me? So you have to, and that's for the strategic long-term view. How do I leave somebody with a longer-term view? What should they do for the future? Then giving feedback on the interview process and so on. Okay, so I was recording it 4 to 5 hours. I had a pen that recorded the notes and so on while I was talking. I brought along enough food to keep us going. And I would take pictures of everything that's on the walls. And the map we created was emailed to the interviews as their own property. And we got the voice recordings transcripted. And it was more than 50 hours to be transcribed. So this was a heck of a job. And it took me 3 months to do a qualitative data analysis using QDminder and thematic mapping to pull the topics out of this. So this is a mountain of data, which to this day I'm still do something with. And then a summary of each viewer interview was made that collated all the information. And my PhD actually contains an 80-page addendum. That's just all the summaries of the conversations. And so the summaries were the start of the analysis process. So this is your flip chart, and you've got stickies. This is the village operating in the middle. And I decided to keep it quite simple. After a lot of thought, there was an order which says, don't ask for information first. Ask for something that isn't that is crucial, but not that sensitive. So ask about advice. So that's the top of the list. Ask about people that you give advice to. So arrow goes that way, or people that you get advice from. And then you start identifying people. So the first thing is you identify the people that you interact with, and they just write down on these sticky notes, the people that they interact with, that they can now recall. What are the people that have any interactions with you or with your business? And then we start drawing the map, we actually add people that they've forgotten about. So more relationships are listed. Then on the business side as well, talk about who refers customers to you, or who do you refer customers to? Something like information, if people are hesitant, you do that later, because information can clutter up your map immediately. Talk about source information. Money is a good one, because that really tells you where the money is going and where the money is coming from. And you have to build up trust before you start talking about money. So you don't start talking about money immediately. And in any case, from the project context, they'd known me for about 2 years. So I wasn't walking there announcing, saying, hi, I'm the researcher, And then commands, I put it in that way and says, who tells you what to do? In other words, who gives you directions, and you have to obey whether you like it or not. And then finally, I would ask them sort of to they could put as many stickers as they want, but where is the major degree of influence? So you can see this is 4 stickers, that's 3, 1, 2, and the rest, yeah, not a lot of influence. And sometimes it's very important, as you can look at these fellow VOs, they didn't have a lot of influence. So in the social network, they were not in the social network of this VO. Oh, they got advice, yes, but they weren't really weighted as this one was. Okay, so this process takes 4 hours. There's about a 10-minute, 20-minute break in the middle because of the discussion that takes place around these different levels. So if you look at this is a company. So if you look at the mutual exchanges, so we've got the money, we've got the services, which is this pencil mark that goes here. Advice is green, business referral is blue, not to clutter the picture, just put a blue arrow there, arrowhead, and information is dotted green. And the level of influence is 2, and orientation of the company. So also about orientation. Are these people really trying to help you? So there's development orientation. Is there a technical orientation to increase internet and internet use? They're trying to sell you, to help you to sell more internet, or they're trying to help you to get more internet. But there's a technical, or they want to fix things, and so on. And entrepreneurial orientation. Are they encouraging you to be entrepreneurial and helping you to become entrepreneurial? And I think that's what's actually quite unique about this in terms of this intentionality. Okay, so the thing about the VOs, while they're unique, is they're locals, they grew up in the community, they speak the language, their parents and their siblings may be there. So you've got this opportunity that your close social bonds and your family support network is still there. Some of them still lived with their parents, most of their mothers. They've got local friends, they go to a local church, and soccer is big in South Africa, really, really big. I mean, we had the World Soccer Cup, right? And so the soccer club is also a very powerful community organization. So if you look at just the area, so here's a high point somewhere up there. You can see this is the radio beam. It is a beam coming in, and then that gets distributed by. It's actually, well, it's a flat panel with 5 gigahertz, and then it's got 2.4 gigahertz to create a Wi-Fi area hotspot. Okay, around the office. So there's a video office, and these are points that are interconnected so that you've got a redundant mesh. So if that point goes down, you can still get to here via this route, okay? And just to give you an idea of how densely populated these areas are, there's nothing, and then you've got a densely populated community. If you zoom in on the top, Komaslanga is actually quite a center of local government. So your circuit office of the Department of Education sits there, and it's got a major secondary school. And the VO office is right opposite the school. So we're trying to support the school. So the location of the VO offices were very, very important. And they chose the locations together with the people to say, okay, we've got some kind of affordability issues here in terms of rent. But you're close to both the departments, the circuit office that's supposed to really pick up the problems in the area, and the schools. And being in the middle of things was the purpose of it. If you look sometimes it's quite a big area. If you look at this office of this village operator, you can see the schools are spread out, and it's quite densely populated areas, and it's quite structured, and it's kind of on the edge. But you get this idea that the spatial planning is such that people are really close to each other. I mean, the scale here is, anyway, it's like 10 to 20 kilometers. The idea was to look at the cost of transport to get to a school, not to make that exorbitant. And you have to transport at the time that the taxis are running. So you've got a certain rhythm of transport that you also have to accommodate, because you don't have your own transport. Okay, I'm just going to dive into a bit of the practical details. That is my car, which I'm still using. It's 11 years old and going strong. So this particular VO, the office was next to Siabuswa Motor Spares, okay? So this is, people come there, and his office was there. And the context is, you can see this isn't tar, because this is just off the main roads. You only got tar on the main roads. And that is the antenna that's there. So that's the flat panel 5 gigahertz antenna, and these are 2.4 gigahertz for area coverage. So if you're near a VO office, you will have internet. You don't need to be in the office, you could be near the office. And safety is a concern. So look at this door, and they chose the label themselves, and it's internet for all. This is the label for the village operator office, and the advertising copy services and internet access. And here's the map that we did. You can see the blue stickers, and it took 4 hours. And this is the equipment, and you have to spend money, the capital amount, it's amazing, to make something that's unbreakable, that you can keep your printer and your other equipment and your ink cartridges locked up. So this is bolted to the wall, and this is got steel bars to lock these points, and they still managed to break one of them. The designer was quite disgusted and redesigned them to make them really bulletproof. Because as soon as people know that there's any computers, they will steal them. So why do schools not have computers? Well, they're stolen. Because you have to build an iron cage, or you have to build a safe. Your school lab is a safe. And a lot of time the servers get stuck in a safe as well. So if you look at the kind of things that happen in terms of the notice board, as we'll go back to this, you can see here's kind of the BP for all service, and then there's specialist information from this guy. If you look at this, there's Internet for All stickers. So this is a VO office. This is right next to the Department of Home Affairs, where people go to get renewals done, birth certificates, all that kind of stuff. So being entrepreneurs, the VOs knew where people were gathering for long-term times and long queues. And so you could attract them to make a photocopy of their ID, because they need that for all affairs, for home affairs. Again, here's the antenna. This is a guy that got community land, and because he's a member of the community, his mother is well known. He got this land and he built this himself. And he, as you can see, he's barred. And then after a while, he got extra money and he provided some shade to his customers that were standing in a queue. So customer-centric. Tristan, you must tell me about the time, because as I said, I'm telling a story and I need to speed it up, right? Because I want enough time for discussion. So I'll skip over stuff. Because I'm telling the story as I go as well, so that, you know, so this is an example of a VO that wanted to go learn, and he actually built his own building. This is Internet for All, and there's the tag. This is right next to a liquor store. Being next to a liquor store is good for security. These people are protected. And this particular person, her dad is a businessman with printing services. So in this little mall, you can't see it around the corner, he installed a print shop to actually help his daughter to get more business in, because they're designing things for people. Okay, so why do some VOs thrive and others not? Is this social capital? How are they using relationships? Does their business and sustainability therefore improve? And so if you look at this business, what was amazing was that I call this the husband and wife team. The husband was a genius at spreadsheets and financial modeling. So if a builder was going to put in a tender, his wife, the VO, would actually scour the tenders and provide the tenders by SMSs, saying to the local builders, the customers, there's tenders out that suit you. The builder would come in, and right in that office, right there, they'll do the whole plan. They'll do the response to the tender, they'll print it out, and they'll email or PDF it, or give them a printed copy to get to the tender office on time. So that's your complete tender service, together with budgeting and thinking about the tender as well. So that's a big advantage. She was a prime example of somebody that connected to other people's business value chains, become part of a business. So, for example, there was one company that was transporting children to other towns by bus, and she told them, well, what I can help you with is I can book accommodation for the kids as well, because I go on the internet and find good price accommodation, so that you can provide accommodation services plus the bus transport service and increase the size of your business. She has a unique relationship with a lawyer, where the lawyer would phone her from court, SMS her or WhatsApp her. She would search the relevant law and SMS the results back to him, so that he can go on in the next hour with a bit more information. So it is just in time doing a search for relevant legal information. So some very innovative services that I can talk for hours, that this lady and her wife and her husband developed. An amazing example. So I put this in just for the fact that I don't have enough time to talk about them, right? So I'll send this presentation out, and here's more of the stories. And I'll go to the summary, just so that people can respond. I'm just going to skip ahead to that. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. We've done that. So to make it simple, so social capital supports a village operator to be able to provide services to customers. The outputs are customers assisted by VOs to make use of the internet and other services. And there's development outcomes in terms of the customers. They achieve what they want, and the VOs are sustainable entrepreneurs. So a network of relationships form part of the social capital: family, friends, business people, pastors. The customers use email services for the creation of an email address. People don't have email if they've got a feature phone. People are not used to using email, they're used to SMSs and WhatsApps. So the VO would create an email address and get all the emails in of that person, the business emails, and then send them SMS or WhatsApp saying, you've got mail. And then you come to my office and you can read your own mail. And if you respond, I type the response to your customer because you can't type. and say you've got this kind of microservice which helps people to the last inch. You're solving the last inch problem by having somebody do it for you. The development outcomes is knowledge of employment opportunities. They're always going to look for what employment opportunities are or tenders. Able to use the internet to apply for a job where people aren't able to do it. They can now do it via the VO, and able to respond to tenders, as I said. And the social capital of VO increases because your clients trust you because you're an intimate part of their lives and their businesses. Okay, so then I developed 3 themes: social capital, there's also community service and social entrepreneurship, and then networks of innovation, how people talk to each other and shared ideas to build on innovations. And I think I'm really going to stop around there, because what we have is just a description here of that your parents, your uncles, your aunts are important, your mother-in-laws. And I'll just do this because for VOs, their mothers in detail, because the mothers with jobs was the main financial support to VOs, and 2 fathers were mentioned. Unfortunately, in South Africa, we have a lot of broken relationships. Their siblings were supportive. The younger sibling would work in the shop. Only 2 VOs actually grew up in families that were in business, and therefore had a head start in terms of exposure to business. And as I said, 2 of the VOs were married, and their spouses were also in business, and that was a big advantage. Bridging capitals, I mean, contact people you know at schools, business people, officials. So some people went for officials, for schools, and some people went for small businesses and their friends, and some were supported by the church. An example is that some of these churches actually have a service in the middle of the week on Wednesdays, where once a month they get a business person to come in to speak to the local youth interested in business. So the church has an active entrepreneurial development and support role, and it's part of their role in the community. And face-to-face contact was important to them. When last have I seen you? I mean, I've talked over email or whatever, but when last have I seen you? And there were close relationships where people paired up. So we had 3 pairs of VOs that worked together in the office because they like to work together. I just want to get to one more. Okay, linking capital, referring business to each other. You're young, so you create a relationship with the son of the owner of a large business. You lobby we make a friend out of the municipal ward councillor. And the project team was trying to link via Microsoft South Africa as well. Okay. Just one more thing maybe before I'm going to sign off and let's go for discussions. I was trying to plot what the VOs were doing in this sort of social entrepreneurship matrix, where people are talking about social entrepreneur, social service provision, social activism. And then Zara was talking about social bricoleurs, social constructionists, social engineers, and social engineers driving catalytic alliances. This is Elon Musk territory. We are really changing the world. And then the size and the scope of the disruption you're causing decreases, because this is where you start at system level. And constructionists, this is the people that help other people to construct a business. So the manager driving the VO model. And the social bricoleur, it's from Latour. It's kind of you working, the bricoleur is you're building a puzzle. You put together whatever you have to create a stable entity. And so the VO is kind of mapped to social bricoleurs because there's social service provision, but a new stable equilibrium is not established. It depends on relationships. And social services are provided, even if only in a single context. So, yes. So sustainability were influenced by their values. Did they really connect with their customers, really interested in the customers rather than the money? Their business innovation strategies and how they connect to the community, the churches, and to other community organizations, the soccer club. One example about soccer. Two of the guys were soccer managers, soccer club managers. The soccer club would put money together every year so that one of their players, when going to university, they could pay half of the university registration fee. And for them, it was a lot of money. So they're investing in the soccer players themselves, and this was invested by the soccer club. Okay. And I think I'm going to stop there because I could really talk a lot more. So, who owns the problem of sustainability? Well, what's a viable strategy? Mobilization of social capital, service innovation, so building blocks. But anyway, I think I've talked enough. So over to you, Tristan, and the team.
Well, thanks, Mario. Yeah, really fascinating presentation, and great to see such in-depth background on the research context and the way in which I was really able to understand, I think, what was going on in that context. So we'll open up for questions. There's a couple in the chat that we'll be able to get to. I thought I might start with the first one, and it's not necessarily exactly what you were researching, so you may not be able to answer it, but I'm quite interested in if you have a perspective about how connectivity or mobile phone ownership or connection to the internet, how that changes the patterns of social interaction in a community. Would it be fair to say that if you have ICT connectivity, does it result in, say, more bridging social capital or more linking social capital? Like, do you have a sense for how it might change patterns of interaction?
I think it's built upon existing social relationships. It's fairly rare that you kind of, if you've got if you are active in business or active in research, you build research networks. If you're a builder, you build out your networks with the suppliers and with your friends, so that if there's spillover jobs, you can do it. So these networks, you would use the smartphone, but it would still be to support existing networks and grow them out maybe a bit more. So it's very much, we don't network just for the sake of networking. You might find that you connect more to soccer fans, or the soccer clubs, the fan clubs are more active and so on. But they've got a point of focus that has always been there. As a source of information about local government, it depends how good government and companies are in getting their information onto the social media. They're putting it in newspapers, they're putting it on websites, so how must you find it out? So is there an active social media strategy to really advertise and broadcast opportunities? And still, the community radio is one of the best channels to actually do that. If you bring lots of money into a community and you're a mine, you can start your strategy at the community radio level and tell them what's going to happen.
So does it start to break down some of the geographic density or geographic focus of networks? Because if you meet someone who lives a bit further away from you, but you have connectivity, then you might be able to maintain that relationship, whereas without the connectivity, you may not be able to do so.
Yeah. It's definitely that people that are on the main road, we're seeing each other because you travel along this main road to see Obispo, for example. So people were along this main road and they were seeing each other more and they were commenting on it. So it's nice to see people more. Well, there were three guys right at the top there, and they formed the cluster where they supported each other because nobody was coming to them. They were way up in the north, going to nowhere. And so they had to support each other to the extent of, if your ink is gone, I'll lend you ink. So when you buy ink, you buy me ink, so that kind of real support. You don't have airtime. Okay, I'll share some airtime with you.
Yeah, right. Paper. Yeah. Well, we've got a few questions in the chat.
Yeah.
Marion, did you want to start? I know you posed a few questions.
I'm sorry. Yes, I've been working away in the back, Mario. So I'm taking several hats off. I'll leave my Rotary hat behind.
I would so love Rotary to get involved, please.
When I finish my PhD, which is currently just being finished off. Yes, but seriously, there's scoping here in the future, but I don't want to inundate you with that sort of era. Firstly, can I just go back to my first question, which again is I find a fascinating one, or is the most fascinating for me, is that you actually said that the application of a systems perspective helped you as the researcher here. Is that correct? And so do you think that we should be encouraging that systems thinking, you know, all of that sort of interconnectedness. Sorry, I teach business. So systems thinking is actually sort of one of the big fields that is taught in business schools. Should we be passing all of that skill on? Because I think it sounds like to me that it's been very useful for you.
Yeah. When my colleague designed it, he's a brilliant telecoms engineer and he's a brilliant electronic engineer, one of the brightest engineers I know. As a systems thinker, the idea was that they would pass responsibility for paying the stipends to this tier 2 support to them from Malanga Department of Education. When we started talking to them, I asked them the first question: how many IT points do you support in this province as a Department of Education IT people? The answer was 11. Okay. And these were district offices where they had computers, where the district and the circuit people in the hierarchy were reporting to them. So it's a structure, a hierarchical structure to design to feed up the information to the hierarchy, right? Now, if you equip every school that they have with a computer, and you do it, and then you pass a burden of responsibility to them to maintain the IT, the ISP aspect, also to actually fix the computers, then the ratio grows up by more than the factor of 200. So the capacity of this system, the IT system support of a provincial Department of Education, is close to 0. And that should have been the first system question we asked. And that's the first question I asked, because we made this assumption, and I thought, gee, you know, all these admin computers, they only serve one purpose. And if you talk to them, let's find out how many actual points do they serve. How many people do they have in the help desk? 2 or 3 people. Do any of them know anything about Android? No, they don't. They only know Microsoft desktops and laptops. Ask the same question in Eastern Cape. I spent 2 days in Eastern Cape looking at the way that the Eastern Cape Department of Education is organized and why IT cannot work across these silos of e-learning and the IT department. The IT department is a rule into themselves. They supply, they will buy IT equipment that is not suitable according to the e-learning people. And so you've got these hierarchical stuff. So I can write a paper about the structure of provincial departments of education. I just hope there are better structures in the world, please. Because I talked to 5 of the provinces' e-learning teams. They're at the heart of making IT useful in the teaching and learning process. Then you find out there are 5 people in the team. So there are 5 people, and I say, okay, you've got 8,000 schools to look after. So how does 5 people do e-learning in 8,000 schools? There's an IT support guide per district, and they combine the rural districts, right? So all of a sudden, this guy had 360 schools to look after with the admin computers, plus donations. So I shook his hand and I said, I don't want your job. It's impossible. There are not enough days in the year for you actually to handle queries and to go out to places. They must all come to you. So what do you end up doing? You only spend your time at district office and circuit offices. So only the top level of the pyramid is served. And the rest, what we try to, we trained up technical people and try to help them to become businesses and connect them to local tech businesses so that they can actually, you need a totally different model of entrepreneurship and enterprise in your government bureaucracy.
Yeah, because so the field analysis in terms of a systems perspective, I'm a Bourdieu type. That's actually critical to understanding what goes forward. So the understanding all of those rules of the game is what we're talking about here. Fabulous.
And I've been asked again to join their forums, but at a forum of the Eastern Cape government, this is now, I'm on the panel, I'm advising. I asked them, I said to them, you are a supplier-driven system. Do you realize it? Vodafone, the mobile operator wants each teacher and each child to have a SIM. So for the first year, the airtime or the data will be free. After that, you start paying. And the budget at one point that the IT director put on the table, I fell off my chair, and so that the deputy DG, luckily so, was 4 billion. They don't have 4 billion to give money to Vodacom to connect schools via mobile connectivity. So it's ludicrous. So we said to them, set up a filter level, an ICT committee. If anyone gives you a donation and they want to give you 1,000 tablets or 1,000 school apps, you tell them, give us 20 of that. 80% of the money we want to spend on training the human capital, the resources to support it for future and to build up a fund to amortize, to actually be able to replace these things. And people think they're doing good. They're not doing good.
Well, that's the same problem. Yeah, we need to talk outside this forum.
Really? Okay. Geez. Yeah. We should write the book about bureaucracies and the way they and the unholy alliance between big money and bureaucracy.
Sorry, I'll hand over to somebody else. I don't want to hog.
Sorry, you're going to get me excited. I wouldn't be able to sleep tonight.
Oh, I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited by all of this.
Well, let's move on to the next question. Aldo, did you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Mario. Always nice to hear new kind of angles on your ever interesting stories. One question that came to mind, I mean, it's been on my mind for a long time, as you know, but you reinforce it. You have a fantastic treasure trove of materials. You went very deep in all of these villages, so you got really rich, situated kind of findings. On the other hand, you have that very abstract, heavy theoretical framework which you need. There's a huge gap between that theoretical layer and that practical layer. So the danger that we academic types can easily impose these categories on them. Did categories emerge from your interactions with people, with, for example, the village operators or their relationships that you then fed back into your theoretical framework? Yeah.
I've got a drawing I can't share, but I did thematic mapping, so I got 5 major concepts that was prevalent in all the meetings, and I could see the interactions between them. So I can share the diagram as well at some point. So that was really the first systems of a picture emerged from the topics from those conversations. Yeah. And the rest I kind of ran into just as I talked to people at different levels in the system. All these vertical linkages.
Yeah, great. So there was a real kind of ownership of the categories to a certain extent as well, not just the data.
Yeah, it wasn't my words. Yeah, it wasn't my words. Yeah.
Right. We'll talk more about that for sure.
Okay.
All right, moving on to the next one. Charlotte asked in the chat if your presentation, your slide deck would be available to share. Are you willing to share that with participants?
Yeah, sure. I think I should share 2 versions. The one is sort of the one I did for my PhD, which is a logical flow. The one of today is a bit of a chaotic ensemble. Due to the fact that I've been hectically busy this week. You can ask Aldo for some of the reasons for that, because we're writing a proposal and doing budgets, and I'm also doing a monitoring evaluation bootcamp, which only ended Tuesday. So that was 9 to 4. So I was working nights for the last week and a half. But anyway, but I have written. I'll send out a link to my PhD. If you've got the stomach to read it, you can just skip lots of chapters of all the theory stuff and just get to the real stuff where the interviews start. So I think that would also be a good call. And I've written an article now with Sarah Vanini to go to the next level to say, how do you organize small organizations? So how do you organize this middle layer that can scale up and I can actually talk to power? And so that's the next step, is network weaving. So I'm a network weaving evangelist, follower of June Holly, part of the Church of June Holly, and the work they're doing that started in America among the Appalachian Mountains, where champions emerge, and then these champions need support in terms of shared issues. And then around these shared issues, you need to get an organization layer. It's like the business model at that level is a double-sided platform. You've got supply and demand, and then you've got a platform in the middle, that broker, connecting supply and demand. So there's actually a social investment institution by the name of Tsukuluru that does exactly that. So they manage CSI funds, and people submit projects to them, and then they look at the viable projects and which project fits the agenda of a certain CI board, to which I really hated when a board has the final say about a development project, because what do they know? But anyway, so they align and tune projects so that it can get a tick from the board, and that's their job. So that's a vital platform that we lack, because the NGOs don't collaborate. We don't see our work as ICT4D people to actually build these platforms. And some people are building platforms, but to build platforms really for this kind of double platform broker layer between all the stuff that happens in the region. We now have again a top-down strategy of government saying, let's look at one district, one plan, because all the government interventions going into a region is uncoordinated. We used to have 56 government departments, now we only have 26 that can be uncoordinated. It's getting better. I think you need 5 government departments to be able to coordinate. Anyway.
And that layer is so critical. And I think we see in development programs all over the world that tends to be underinvested in. And I think we see an assumption, particularly by a lot of the big development players, that, if we create these on the ground structures, that they're going to work and be very effective. But in fact, if you don't have that layer, then you don't have that connectivity between the bottom and the top. You don't have, it's basically not appreciating the importance of social capital. Really, which results, I think, in an underinvestment in that layer that you're talking about.
So I've got a slide on an architecture that's very raw, but an architecture for social support structures, or for support structures that support development right from between these 3 layers. Because I think that's what one needs to coordinate. So you need a regional layer that can talk to regional players, and you need the sort of the national level as well. So you need at least a 3-layered level, but you need it to be a broker for lots of different organizations. Maybe I should just share that one slide and say, look, this is what I think we should be going for. We should be going for the big system. Go big or go home.
Yeah. Well, if you could send me some of the links and maybe slide deck, a link to your thesis. And then I can send them out to everyone who registered for this session, so they have access to those resources. But I think Charlotte actually has a question or something she would like to say. So feel free to unmute yourself, Charlotte.
Hi, Charlotte.
I think you're good.
Okay. Hi. Thank you so much for this presentation. Just fascinating. And I'm very happy to actually see all the stuff in South Africa, because I'm South actually. And my PhD actually, I graduated last year, and I looked into the townships, and I find a lot of similarities actually in terms of area needs and the townships, because though the townships may be in urban areas, but they are on the outskirts of these urban areas. So there's a problem of access actually to a lot of resources, they spend more money in terms of transportation, there's no infrastructure. If someone wants to grow their business outside of the township, for example. So I think I'm gonna really need your expertise in terms of social capital, because what I looked at, why I did this study of entrepreneurship, the state of entrepreneurship in the townships, is because research has shown that entrepreneurship in the townships in South Africa is really low.
You're right.
Despite all the resources, it's not showing any return on investment. So I also did a qualitative study. I spent some time with people. So I do a lot of data as well from the townships. So what came out was like a low entrepreneurship culture in the townships, like the entrepreneurial mindset and social capital as well, because people tend to be quite divided. Some jealousy if this one is succeeding, and not supporting each one's local business. They would rather go to town and buy and even pay more than support the neighbor's business. And then course, the human capital in terms of education in South Africa is the same. And then, of course, financial capital and access to internet as well. So what I would like to do, actually, I've set up what I call the Inclusive Entrepreneurship Academy, you know, in South Africa, registered, it's a social enterprise. And so I was just thinking of working with high schools, like starting from a young age, like design, look at how I can help, you know, develop entrepreneurial mindset from an early age. As you mentioned, there's a very high level of unemployment, you know, especially the youth. So
and you lose hope.
social,
You lose hope after.
I've met people. It was quite tough actually to speak to people who were younger, you know, post-apartheid, so helpless, like feeling so like it was quite challenging. So I just thought I should maybe try and contribute to something. I'll see.
Absolutely,
some funding for this project, but social capital is key, really. I think I would like to embark on a study in this sense, in this context, just to you know, just to check what's going on in terms of the social capital, social networks. And then see how it can be, what model can be established, you know, to just to contribute to some sustainable development in this area.
I know some entrepreneurs who are actually investing in entrepreneurs. That's because they are entrepreneurs. But one of the things that really worried me was that in a certain project, a person is a person, and all of a sudden they get framed as being an entrepreneur. The project frames you, puts you in a box and says, this box is called entrepreneurs, and put you in a box. And some of the people weren't entrepreneurs. So how do you sort of have a process where people can be what they want to be and what they are without having to stay in the box that you created and limiting their creativity? Because you will only give money to, if I call myself an entrepreneur, you know, and sort of tattoo the word entrepreneur on my chest and say, I'm an entrepreneur. Yes. So
they
that
told
really
me,
is a problem.
They told me because I had access to government, you know, the government has established these incubators now in the townships in Gauteng. So they have, they have 3D printers, whatever, but no one can use them.
Right.
On top of that, the entrepreneurs that come in, they have to choose projects, you know, because the funding wants them to do this because they
directed, Just one thing that's very relevant. I've got a list of about 110 innovation incubators at the moment. We're supporting a government agency that wants to know how do you create a grassroots innovation incubator. And they exist and they get abused by companies double dipping because they do the same thing. They say they do the same, you know, they've done two different things, or they provide different services. So there's corruption going on, but they really want to help, but they are sitting in an ivory tower. And, you know, I can write the first recommendation already for the report and say, empower local people to become your agents, you know, to become an extension of your agency, you know, have local train up as extension officers. Because for agriculture, for all those things, you don't have enough government people at the front face from the community. And that's where your talent gets developed to say, you help us to actually filter out the noise, and you help us to actually be part of the investment process and the support process and the design thereof from local talent. So I'm a bottom-up person right from the word go.
It's like design thinking, kind of. From a design thinking kind of perspective as well.
Because support structures exist. There are existing support structures that people don't pick up, they don't recognize, and they don't support it. It's like they're invisible. But nobody asked the question, go in and ask questions, how do you exploit each other? How do things actually, why can you go to school? You might find there's a huge, large support structure about that. Yeah. So I'd love to talk to you about the characteristics of incubators, because that's where we are now.
Okay, I'll be in Joburg July, August.
No, it'd be lovely to see you. Lovely to see you.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Really, if we can invest in these relationships, if we can understand the importance of them and then spend the time investing in these relationships, including with community and finding people who want to work, with these organizations and work with community and investing in those things, then that's where the biggest impact can be made and reached. And hopefully understanding social capital can communicate the importance of that.
I would so love it if we've got the language of social capital or networks as formally as, hubs and authorities. And, it's the formal, the graph science kind of approach. But we need a language of development that speaks to the people as the roles that they see as being supportive roles. We really need that language. And we need to use, what do you go for a shebeen for? It's not just for drinking, it's also to make friends, but also it might be a source of a loan. So we need to use the terminology of the support structures in townships, in rural areas, and we need to get that into the development sphere and say, use this terminology, because then people then understand, and you'll understand what kind of roles are needed in support structures.
Yeah,
because our model for support structure comes from a totally different environment. It's absurd.
And then we do need to put some effort into translating these relatively theoretical academic types of language and discussions into the language that actually makes sense to people in a tangible kind of way. And there's still a bit of a divide there, I think, that we need to continue to work on ways to communicate these ideas.
One difference you can see quite clearly, if I'm in a car and we're driving to a particular government building, and it's a street with a lot of taxis, some people freeze. I open my window and I lean out and I communicate with other drivers so that I get my slot. If you just close down your boundaries and you're just scared and you're saying, oh, heck, you must be part of the conversation. So I've got my window open and I've got my hand and I'm talking and I'm indicating I want to go there. And people open up for you and you open up for other people. So it's a dance that you participate in and the traffic flows. But if you're not part of that pattern of relationships that forms the dance, then you're like a barrier wall and you're not really useful. So go with the flow. I know my wife freezes up. A lot of my colleagues freeze up, and Marais is at his most sort of, convivial, and I just go for it because I love it. I love making eye contact, saying, how's it,
Absolutely. And Aldo made a comment, the observation about jealousy that Charlotte was talking about. You'd rather go to town than support your neighbor. And so he's asking whether or not you were mapping any of the antisocial capital relationships.
Yes, definitely. There's definitely group formation. There's people that through their habit of always asking, and the takers that never give back, they get ostracized. You've also got the phenomenon that people might isolate you in the sense that you're not really part of the group, as it were, because of some people that are lone individuals. They're actually not really group people. So in that way, you kind of get ostracized. But you can also get ostracized if you break trust and you don't repay a loan in between each other. So there are many ways of conflicts developing. And also if you try and gather customers from another person's territory, that's the ultimate sin. Because you're now in my turf and you're getting customers from my turf. You're in big trouble then. So
was that coming out in your qualitative? Yeah, so you're being able to identify some negative relationships.
Yeah. Because I would ask, why aren't you talking to this person? You can no relationship with these people. So why is there this gap? Why aren't you not talking to them? Yeah. And then they tell the story about why.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think
I'm
that
kind of
is
inquisitive.
Yeah, it's an assumption we often make, I think, when we're talking about social capital, that networks are positive. Like if you know people, then you're going to be pro-social towards them. But like, as we all know, we know people who we don't really like, or where there was a betrayal of trust, and there is some negative attitudes there.
And the moment you form a very cohesive group, you're also othering other people. So you're not part of the group. So you need that important person, the bridging people are really very important, and the linking people, because they get away from the othering. Because you've got the ivory tower people sitting in the office saying, we are office people. You're just a small entrepreneur, but that's a tight group of people that take a government salary and do nothing with it. But they still consider themselves to be one level up in the hierarchy because they've got a job.
So do you find many other attitudes towards out-group, like any, if you like, stereotypes where people were expressing views about somebody based on, the job that they had, or perhaps even their ethnicity, or like any other sort of out, or gender, or, those kinds of things?
Yeah. I found in 3 different communities in other contexts as well that if you look at the rural town, for example, I talked to an activist for over 2 days. If you look at the supply chains of the small businesses, you find that the Pakistanis come in, or especially the Pakistanis, and they organize their supply chain back to Pakistan. So anything from goods and sweets, and they're doing all the wholesale stuff themselves. So they're keeping this whole channel, and Ethiopians do the same. And with the India communities, the Indians were really the sort of the hub of the commerce, because they also self-organize themselves. They're now very upset by another group organizing the same kind of supply chain. But at least there was interaction at the wholesale level with big South African wholesalers. But the Pakistanis create their own ethnic supply chain. And this is a fairly big town. And the same thing happened when I was with the guy with the shade netting. We said, okay, let's get something cool. And there was a Pakistani shop right across his place. He said, no, let's go next door to the spaza shop and get a drink there. I don't support the Pakistanis.
Right. Because when we're talking about anti-social capital, I think that those sorts of stereotype type predisposition attitudes can create really widespread barriers to social capital benefits that might come about.
And then the economic structure means that there's fronting at that level, where a spaza shop, in fact, is supplied by the Pakistani supply chain. So the owner isn't really the owner. The owner is supplied by the Pakistani, and is part of that system. And then they get ostracized because they're actually part of the Pakistani system.
Yeah. Complex, not always positive.
Yeah.
So we're starting to run a little, well, we're over time, but I think we should look to wrap up fairly soon. But are there any final questions or thoughts? I've enjoyed reading a few of the comments in the chat from Linda. So if you wanted to unmute yourself, Linda, you're welcome to chime in on that. And any other final thoughts?
I'm just happy to type in the chat.
Thanks, Linda.
Very good. We've enjoyed reading those comments. Any other questions or comments?
There's an open invitation from my side to talk to me anytime, and you will have as much help as you want, because this is what I'm passionate about. And let's just say the work I'm working for Safe Surgery South Africa at the moment, and I spent last Saturday on a workshop that started at 9 and ended at 4. And this is to support an NGO to create a community of practice among clinicians, surgeons, and anesthesiologists, so they actually share medical knowledge across the boundaries of the hospitals and the medical aid funds and government. So whenever there's a silo or a boundary, then I'm there to try and get this transverse connections going. So I'm supporting Naila Klotz now, because I mean, she's getting lots of money from AWS, Amazon Web Services. So there's really money in different fields for breaking down the existing commercially created silos that doesn't help the patient.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Well, I'm sure some of the participants will take up your invitation to be in contact in future.
Yeah.
So let's wrap
And
up
read,
this session.
read June Holly. June Holly is reading a new book. She's writing a new book. Sorry, I talk too fast. If I get excited, I talk too fast and I miss words. So June Holly, her whole history, all the organization that she's been involved with, it's just amazing. And the other must-read person is Eleanor Ostrom, because of the Nobel Prize for Economics was about the tragedy of the common goods or commons and so on. And because we're dealing with the tragedy of commons in so many different ways. We live in the same community, we have the same common interests, but do we get up and self-organize to actually address this tragedy?
Absolutely.
Don't let government do everything for you.
So such important work as well.
Yeah.
So let's wrap up this session. The next webinar is going to be by Professor Sally Davenport, who's going to be talking about social capital ideas for building a mission-led research program. She's a New Zealand presenter from the University of Wellington here in New Zealand. And then the following week, we have Dr. Mason Matthews, who's going to be talking about how social capital is created and maintained to achieve development goals. And he's going to be presenting the results of some very interesting research out of the riverine area of the Amazon, looking at the combination of bonding, bridging, and linking and how those configurations
that makes sense.
Development goals.
Yeah. Whose forest is it?
Yeah. So we'll wrap up there. Thanks again very much, Marais, for your presentation. Hope to see everyone at a future.
Okay.